The African National Congress's conference is less than 6 weeks away. Divisions over the party's step-aside resolution are now beginning to reveal the leadership preferences of different formations. Today, the Gauteng ANC has called for the step-aside resolution to be reviewed due to what they say is inconsistent application. But while some provinces and leaders are against the rule, others are defending it. Our reporter Govan Whittles joins us now with the latest on this. Govan, good evening to you. Let's start by tallying up the divisions. What is the state of play regarding the step-aside? Who's for it, who's against it?
Well, let's look at the provinces. Firstly, we know that Gauteng, today speaking to Newzroom Afrika, saying they believe it's inconsistently applied, they want it reviewed. But there are a number of significantly large provinces that are defending it. The Mpumalanga's Provincial General Council recently decided that it supported the step-aside decision, needs it to be defended. We know the Eastern Cape took a similar position, but KwaZulu-Natal and Limpopo believe it should be reviewed. The Northwest and the Free State are undecided, and we know that the Northern Cape, of course, its chairperson Zamani Saul, one of the more passionate defenders of the decision. And really what this describes, or what this reveals, is the way that the provinces will approach the leadership contest. In many ways, the step-aside decision does reflect the leadership contest itself, with the most prominent members of the ANC who are contesting for leadership, many of them implicated. We know that some of them will continue to contest, even though they're implicated in the state capture report. But those who are charged won't be allowed to contest, and that's really what the contestations or divisions are all about. Let's take a look at what the Gauteng Secretary, TK Ngqiza, had to say about the decision, and you can read into his comments, particularly around those who have been implicated but not charged, and what Gauteng believes should happen to them.
I think for now it's not used fairly, and the fact that an NEC will then sit the following week and change the decision, another NEC will do that on the basis of whose content, I just feel we must go and correct it. It must be applied, but how it's done, I mean, two comrades from Limpopo were outside for a very long time. When many people were then starting to be accused, they then changed the step aside and they said you must be charged. And then after that, there's always some movement on the application of the step, which for me is a problem. But step aside is a correct. You ordinarily, if you know your name is dragging the ANC into the mud, you must step aside. Doesn't matter who you are. If you are not individualistic in your approach, you must step aside and protect the brand of the ANC, whether from the president till the last member, ordinarily. But because today all of us, it's about individuals, about you are my this or whatever the case might be, we don't do it. Then we are forced to document even step aside. The step aside is not supposed to be a documented policy, in my view. It's supposed to be a conscious decision from a member of the ANC if they feel they're dragging the name of the ANC into the mud. And I think it must apply across.
Attached to that is the step-aside decision. We have the implementation of the state capture report. Dr. Zamani Saul has lots to say about that, the Premier of the Northern Cape.
He does indeed, drawing a parallel between the state capture report and the Scorpions in 2007. That's interesting because firstly he acknowledges that people were implicated in the report, according to the ANC's rules, could still contest for leadership. But then says the future of the state capture report depends on who's elected, and essentially the branches need to have a close look at it and see how it will affect the conference. Interestingly, before we look at Zamani Saul's comments on the state capture report, should be noted Paul Mashatile, the Treasurer General of the ANC, saying to Newzroom Afrika the state capture report won't affect the ANC's conference at all, and he believes that the ANC is not accused of anything, rejecting the notion that it's accused number one. Those are interesting comments. We'll have that later on in Newzroom Afrika. But let's take a look at what Zamani Saul had to say about the state capture report and how it's essentially tied to the campaign by President Cyril Ramaphosa for renewal in the ANC.
When we went to the 2007 National Conference, the issue of the existence of the Scorpions and the perceived persecution of Comrade JZ was a big issue. In actual fact, it determined the outcomes of that conference. That is the reason why the newly elected NEC in 2007, before March in 2008, the NEC already took a decision that the Scorpions must be disbanded. So because that was one of the driving political discussions towards the National Conference, even now we are sitting more or less with the same situation. We've got a Zondo Commission report which implicates senior leadership of the ANC. it will be a major issue for discussion towards the national conference. And I'm certain that the leadership contestation will evolve around it. And I'm of the firm view. I'm raising it now. I'm of the firm view of Comrade Cyril, with his program of renewal of the ANC. Comrade Cyril is the core leader of the renewal of the ANC. If he loses that conference, by end of March next year, the state capture report will be thrown out of the window. And there will be all sorts of reasons why not those recommendations should be implemented. I'm quite convinced about that. We'll just have a rerun of what happened to the Scorpions in 2007.
Those are incredibly strong comments, Govan. I mean, it really sets up the December conference. This is the defining issue of the conference. It really sets it up. If you've got what Gauteng has said to Newzroom Afrika today, what they said to you today, and what Zamani Saw says, I mean, there could be quite a lot of contestation here.
It could be, and what's interesting is that the implicated parties in the state capture report are facing campaigns where a number of them have strong opponents. Let's take Gwede Mantashe as national chairperson contest against Stan Matabata, the chairperson of the ANC in Limpopo. Stan Matabata not implicated in the state capture report, seen as a front runner for the position of national chairperson. But Gwede Mantashe, a strong personality, now not only going up against Stan Matabata, but also against the state capture report. And we received a comment from the presidency which says the president wants ministers who are implicated in the state capture report to review the report in court sooner rather than later, setting up another hurdle. And the same could be said for Zandile Gumede, as well as Zizi Kodwa, as well as Tabang Makwetla, the Deputy Minister of Defense. These are strong leaders in the ANC who are now going to conference, shoring up a lot of support in their respective provinces, and getting those provinces to question whether or not the state capture report should be a factor. Later on, we'll play Paul Mashatile's comment on the report, and I think that is also to be considered on the backdrop of what Zamani Saw said. It's clear that the Renewal project will be tied to the implementation plan of the state capture report. Looking at all of this is Jeff Radebe and his committee that is supposed to set up the plan of the ANC to implement the report. And that goes to Dirk Kotze, the professor from the University of Pretoria, who says that the ANC now has to present a plan to implement the state capture report that will speak to the renewal program, while at the same time not setting them up for that entire plan to be rejected at the conference because it's too one-sided. So what could Jeff Radebe's team possibly do that will satisfy South Africa's expectation for strong implementation of the report, while at the same time not isolating a huge part of the ANC, which is trying to mobilize itself essentially against full implementation that would see a lot of leaders out in the cold? Let's take a look at what Dirk Kotze had to say.
I think the ANC, well, the Radebe Ramaphosa group will be very careful that it is not seen as too much one-sided. But at the same time, the dilemma for them is that they cannot really compromise on it, because it is something which is in the public eye, so much condemning the ANC of the past, especially of the Zuma period. So in order to whitewash it, or to say, but it is not as important or as significant as the rest of society looks at it. So I think that's the very difficult choice that they will have to make of how to maintain their own status as a political party and governing party, but at the same time to make enough of a move to say, well, we cannot deny this happened in our name in the past, and that to a large extent we need to take ownership of that.
Well, more reporting on that from Govan Whittles, more comments from Paul Mashatile and others through the evening here on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405.